Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Faiza Naqvi in your own program, Meri, Pehchan. I hope you all are doing well by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah protect you all from all the worldly evils and the evils hereafter, and keep you all safe, healthy, blessed in all manners. Today, the most important topic we are going to discuss and about to discuss is UK economic control of Middle East and Asia. We'll look into it, like why it is important to discuss it and how it is going to impact on our own lives and the lives within our countries, and how it's gonna impact in everyday life in general. And for that matter, I have a small a map in which we can discuss or think, like how the trade within Britain and the Middle East is ongoing, how import and export ratio is like working over there. If we think about or talk about the United Arab Emirates, UAE is the UK's largest market in MENA and the 12th biggest globally. Bilateral trade in goods and services reached up to 12.95 billion in 2014. And many British companies have a long and successful history of working in the UAE. And these include global companies, large engineering companies, and many others. And around 120,000 British nationals are resident in the UAE. In the same way, in Saudi Arabia, the total exports from UK in since 2015 is 6.6 billion, and total imports into the UK in 2015 was 2.3 billion. In Qatar, if we see and analyze total exports, and I'm just talking about at the moment the figures I have from 2015, and total exports from like Qatar was 2.6 billion, and total imports into UK was 2.7 billion. And if we look at the Kuwait stats, total exports from UK 2015 is 1.4 billion, and total imports into the UK was 0.8 billion. So that's how UK like have an economics ground over there in Middle East and Asia. And we'll discuss it further in more depth with our guest, and we'll see why it is important to discuss this issue and how it is going to play a vital role in our lives collectively as Muslim countries. So I'll move forward to my guest, Dr. Rebecca Masterton, and she's a writer, she's a researcher, and she is also the anchor as well. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Rebecca. Thank you so much for your time and joining in on this important topic of UK economic control of the Middle East and Asia. And I'm really grateful for your time and honored to have you on the show. Sister, first of all, I would like to know why it is important for us as collectively, like most importantly, the Shia community, why it is important for our community to understand the economics control of the Middle East, like UK economic control, why it is important, like that we should know it, and we should talk about it, and we should discuss it, and we should understand it, what's happening around us.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa alaikum salam, sister, and salam alaikum to everyone who may be tuning into this program. So we have already talked about the control that the British Empire used to have across the globe. And the British had a number of strategies for gaining this control. These strategies are still not fully understood today. We've heard of one strategy, which is divide and rule. I think it's maybe even been forgotten by many contemporary Muslims around the world of how Britain categorized different groups and tried to exploit the differences between those groups. We can see that this happened in India between Hindus and Muslims, even the idea of having Hinduism didn't really exist until the British came along and turned it into a category. At one point, the British were trying to fit subcontinent people into different categories in order to be more, for it to be easier to manage different groups. And so they were actually getting subcontinent people, India, who at the time were in all Indians, trying to get them to categorize themselves either as Muslim or as Hindu. And this made Indian people more conscious of their differences. When we look at the 1857 uprising against British rule that happened in the 19th century, we see that Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs, they all worked together to try to throw off British rule. And so there was less of a consciousness of the differences between neighbors who had often lived very harmoniously. And the Islamic model is to live together harmoniously. This is what the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his holy progeny wanted in Arabia. He made treaties, peace treaties of agreement with people of different religions, Jews, Christians, polytheists. He made peace treaties with them for people to agree to live together harmoniously. So the reason why we are talking about the stats that you've just given today, the investment of the British government in Gulf countries, control that the British government still has in East Asia, is because the economic, social, and political disempowerment of Muslims, and by extension Shia, is because of not partly because of strategies taken by the post-empire British government, who worked together with elites in Pakistan and India, Afghanistan, Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. So last time we had a comment from somebody in response to the program saying that this idea of empowerment or disempowerment was introduced until the work of Michel Foucault was popularized in Western academia, that Michel Foucault was not the first to talk about power relations in different societies. Kant talked about power dynamics between different classes. And in fact, when we go right back to the coming of Islam with the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his holy progeny, Islam was all about the challenging of existing power dynamics in Arabian society. This is why the Quraysh, this is why the different Arab tribes, this is why Bani Umayyah, who were a branch of Quraysh, Bani Hashim being another branch of Quraysh, were against the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. It's because he challenged the power dynamics of his society. So I would have to say, with all due respect, it's a little bit intellectually pretentious to say that we have to talk about Michel Foucault and say that, you know, he was the first to dynamics in society, not to mention that Michel Foucault, who has been praised and lauded in intellectual circles, was actually a paedophile. And a lot of these Western intellectuals, such as Paul Sartre and others, went into North Africa and actually had tendencies. They preyed on Muslim kids in order to gratify their lowest desires, and these people have been praised in Europe and in the West, and are still held up as examples to look at, when actually I would say they're just frauds. If Michel Foucault was busy exploiting North African boys for his own
mm,
sick satanic pleasure, then whatever he had to say in his books is really an irrelevance, right? And so again, we need to stop looking to so-called important names in the European and United States, and maybe briefly look at how they may have influenced modern-day thought that we have today, but certainly being aware of their corruption, that their corrupt and disgusting practices, their hypocrisy that they have exhibited in their lives, and their
mm.
total disrespect for Muslims and the Muslim world and Islam as well. So this is just a few examples of why we need to dig a lot deeper, because Muslims today are still unaware of how they're manipulated and exploited. This is why we're talking about what we are talking about today.
Okay, so sister, tell me something like what economics strategies they used, for example, Britain used in order to control the Middle East and Asia resources, or how would you respond to this question, and how do you see that?
Yeah, so we have talked about this book, and I don't agree with everything in this book, but
Mm,
I can really, really recommend that viewers get this book. So it's called Secret Affairs by Mark Curtis, and he is a British journalist. And
mm-hmm,
this book studies declassified files that reveal how the British government has supported mainly Salafi organizations,
mm,
and has primarily only been interested in promoting its economic interests in the Middle East and the Muslim world.
mm,
And as and Jack here, but it's made up of different weapons. And
mm,
so there's United Kingdom there, and here we've got an umbrella which represents the weather in England. Here we've got fighter jets, guns, and rifles.
mm,
So this is talking this book back. I'm going to this book in this program to help people to understand better what has how Britain has gained its control over these regions. So we need to understand this. Mark Curtis says that Britain has contributed to the rise of the terrorist threat. Now, this is very important for us to understand in the world today, because we have had in the last 20 years, since 9/11 in
mm,
2001, when the airplanes crashed into the World Trade Center.
mm,
After that, we had the launching of the War on Terror by George Bush. And this, President George Bush, and this prized the world even more. So for that, it was still a struggle for, to kind of build understanding and bridges between the Muslim world and Europe and United States. I converted to Islam in 1999, and I
mm,
realize now, looking back, that I was actually completely unaware of things that were going on between Europe and
mm,
different organizations in the Middle East and Asia. So 9/11 was really just a kind of another event that took place after other events that had taken place, like, you know, the war between Russia and Pakistan, and then the war in Bosnia, and you know, and the Serbs and so on. So what the British have done in order to gain control of economies in Middle East and subcontinent is to support the very terrorist groups that publicly says it is against. Now, this is very interesting because outwardly what the British government has done is to say that, you know, oh my God, there are all these terrorist organizations that are a threat to the West, and that Muslims should be under, and that they are a threat to Western interests, and that and Muslim organizations to fight against this terrorist threat. 9/11 happened, you know, Muslims in Britain who are living in Britain didn't even go out. I mean, I remember when 9/11 happened, and Muslims here, a lot of them left the UK because they were so afraid of the backlash from British, you know, non-Muslim British people on the street. They were so afraid of being attacked in the street that they felt it was safer to get out of the UK. I didn't have that luxury of immediately leaving the UK, and I remember being out on the streets in London, and you know how Muslims felt under threat from the backlash that was going to come from 9/11. So for 20 years, Muslims have been under this psychological pressure to prove that they are good people and nice people, to cooperate with the British government. We've had the prevent that the British government has run, encouraged Muslims to spy on their family members, you know, to spy on students in class, and to basically act as sort of intelligence for the British government on what is in Muslim communities in Britain and elsewhere. And so that the main message that the British government has put out there is that, you know, you Muslims, you are a potential threat to, you know, Western culture, and you have to do the hard work of proving that you are good people. What has been going on behind the scenes is that the British government has actually been funding, working with these groups, cooperating with these groups, offering shelter to these groups as well, visa housing, to bring them into the UK in order to continue intelligence from these groups. So what these groups have done, let me give you an example. Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, who are operating in Egypt, they have been shelter by Britain, housing, funding, and they have done, you know, there's something called the Faustian Pact. Faust was meant to be the another word for the devil, the devil's pact. These terrorist organizations, they so-called make a pact with the devil, meaning members of the British government. They will have an agreement that we will work together if you let us do what we want to do, and we will let you do what you want to do. They have pacts and agreements behind the scenes, and the British government will even say that you know, actually it's in our interest, it's in the British government's interest to say support Ikhwan al-Muslimin against socialist movements in the Middle East. We want the socialist movements out of the Middle East, because socialist movements in the Middle East, in Iran and in Egypt, they wanted to nationalize the oil and the resources in those countries. Gamal Abdel Nasser's government in Egypt, they wanted to nationalize Egyptian resources. Mossadeq's government in Iran, In the 50s, they wanted oil. This was not in the interests of the US and the UK. And so what the US and the UK did was to work together with groups such as Ikhwan al-Muslimin, who also wanted this socialist influences out of Egypt and out of Iran. We'll give you weapons. We will help you work, your propaganda. We will give you positions like mufti. We will, as they did in Muhammad Abduh. Muhammad was a member of Ikhwan al-Muslimin. He was also a Freemason, and he was made mufti of Egypt by the British government. And yet Muslims are unaware of this. They look at Muhammad Abduh as, oh, he's a hero against the West. No, he was playing a double game. There's a lot of double games going on that Muslims need to understand.
Mm. Sister, here I want to know one thing. When all these things are happening around the globe, where were the elites, Muslim elites, especially in the politics and political world? Where were all they gone? I mean, was there no one, even a single person, who was the, like, you can say, had pure intention for Muslims and think about these things and could dig out all these things which were happening around that time? And how would you see that, like, where was that elite and why they didn't take any action while understanding this, instead of like accepting their slavery and accepting their demands and accepting their pacts and contracts they were doing with our people around the globe in Muslim countries? So where was their wisdom, and where were the think tanks of those countries? So why they are so much you can say fast asleep or something, that they couldn't do anything? Even now we are all in a state of like always justifying, no, Islam is a peace, Islam is this, Islam is that, and we everything bad happen around us, we just feel all the Muslims are bad, or all the Pakistanis, or for example any Muslim national from anywhere, they think like, oh, we will be like judged and we will be punished and we will be attacked, or we will be these kind of things. So how do you see that, and why do we have that void?
I think that we still are living under the influences of the British Empire. And what happened with the British Empire was that it came to an end partly because of a lot of independence movements, but also partly because it wasn't economically viable for to occupy and rule over countries such as Nigeria, Africa. We know Britain occupied many countries. We just use some African countries as an example. And Britain found it more economically useful. So we always have to have economics at the front. Britain is always going to be trying to look at what is more economically viable. If have from the British Empire, that will partly because of the British Empire have decided that it's cheaper to get out of that country. That's what we had
Hmm.
in India. 100 years ago, society was quite different in both, say, subcontinent and Britain. In Britain, we had a very powerful upper class. We had the upper class who were the lords and the earls, and they were very closely connected to the monarchy. Winston Churchill was a member of the upper class. And then you have the middle class, such as the teachers and the lawyers. And then you have the working class, who are like miners and street. So in 100 years ago, the upper class had all the power. And likewise in subcontinent, we see that the Nawabs and the Lab also have in subcontinent the upper class, the elite, and then a kind of a middle class, the teachers, the lawyers, the doctors. And then we have the agri workers, again, the working class who were not given an education, and they're not seen to have any particular worth by the elites. They're just there to prop up the elites. So elites in Europe and elites in the subcontinent, their attitude towards the working classes is that all of the working classes is simply to fund the lifestyle of the elite. The elites of Europe and the elites of the subcontinent, they saw themselves as kind of equals, on a par with each other. So
mm,
the elites of subcontinent didn't look at their working class and say, "Oh, we're in this together, and we want to fight for our people, and we want independence." They didn't want independence for their working class.
mm,
They wanted their working classes to not have education and to be subjugated. Because otherwise, if the working classes, the agricultural people, are educated, they're not going to tolerate being exploited by the elites and by the upper classes. We also have another fact years ago, which is still today, which is the spread of Freemasonry. I don't want to sound conspiratorial. I'm looking into this from a more sociological, scientific perspective of the influence that Freemasonry had. So
mm,
the Freemasons, who had, really started to empower themselves at the end of the 18th century, and were attracting a lot of very intelligent and well-connected business people, were preaching a kind of a rationality. They preached a kind of modern, they preached modernity, and they preached science, and this attracted a lot of Muslims. The
mm,
Muslims, particularly the middle class, the lawyers, they were looking at their society saying, we are backward, and our country are behind. The way forward is to be like the Europeans.
mm,
Iranians, they were looking at they I mean, they even thought they have to imitate European culture. In Iran, they established an art school so that Iranians could learn European style art. They saw this as progress. They saw
mm,
traditional Iranian art as backward. This is part of our past. This is an embarrassment for us. And the way forward is to imitate the Europeans. We see this in Turkey as well. We had the Young
mm,
Turks, who were also Freemasons, and they for Turks to become like Europeans. So this way of thinking is what we still have today, even among elites. They still
that's
look at the West and they say, we have to like Europeans because they are more advanced. Not only, do we have to be like Europeans in terms of their manufacturing of weapons, but we have to be like them in terms of their culture and their thinking. And so today in Pakistan, we have so-called Shi'i elites who
mm,
drink alcohol, who don't wear hijab, and who support LGBT, and who are actively supporting European interests in Pakistan because privately they feel embarrassed about, the practice of traditional Islam
mm.
today, the situation. The elites are embarrassed about being a traditional Muslim.
Right. So, tell me one thing: how we can take our people out of that slavery? Like, because this is kind of, if we think about it in a deeper sense, it's more like a mental slavery, and more like a, you can say, like they don't have self confidence on their own values, or the confidence on their own values. Brought by Islam or something, so they think if we are doing practicing Islam, we are backward or something like that. So who can help to make things better and take our people on a like with a better approach, like they can come forward and take like pride in accepting our own values, take pride in our own Islam, and take pride in understanding Islam in a better and effective and political and principled way, like in which they can follow it, they can regulate the principles out of Quran or Sunnah or whatever. So who can do that, and who is not doing that job? Who is at fault in that scenario?
From Well, when I go out into different communities, so I talk at a lot of ABSOCs and in British Shi communities, uh, also to the young people, in their teens, in their 20s. When I talk about these issues, that these issues are not being discussed from the member.
Hmm.
And of course, that's a whole other discussion as to how should the minbar be used. I mean, essentially,
Hmm.
the minbar is sacred, and we do not want to tarnish the minbar or lower its status. So that would be another discussion, that whether the minbar itself should be used specifically for talking about the ethical and spiritual teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, or whether it should also be used to talk about modern day political issues as well.
Hmm.
And I leave as a to other educators of the community. Suffice to say, let's put the minbar aside. Let's even not on the minbar, but just say on TV channels like this, that
Hmm.
we need to have these kinds of discussions uh, held by scholars uh, in the Muslim world.
Hmm.
Most of the time, what we have going on is like I've said, the kind of the detail, what happened to the Ahlul Bayt. This is kind of much the focus of trying to get a world, what happened to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And it's almost seen as kind of like, if we can just get across what happened to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, then this will somehow, all the other problems will be solved.
Hmm.
But what this means is that nothing is being addressed today on real issues.
Hmm.
People are not being educated on what is going on with real issues. And I'm not saying that what happens to the Ahlul Bayt is not a real issue. It's a real issue, but we have to connect that to the
Hmm.
situation that is happening today. We have a lot of intertribal Shiite politics. We have a lot of
Hmm.
corruption going on, lies and deception. We have a lot of prominent personnel in the Muslim world who outwardly are teaching the teachings of Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but privately they are cooperating with United States interests and
Hmm.
British interests, and they
Hmm.
are, just as what happened 100 years ago, they come to an agreement with the United States, or they come to an agreement with Britain, where
Hmm.
United States and Britain will say, we will fund your institutes, we will
Hmm.
fund your conferences, and we will give you nice big houses, we will give you cars, we will promote your media, we will give you funding for your media, put your um, your financial interests in the Middle
Hmm.
East, which means buying up property, uh, kind of basic financial interest. We will support all of that in exchange for you distracting Shiite populations away from the real issues.
Hmm.
So a soft Shiism, you could say, It's a soft Shiism which focuses upon hijab, which focuses upon the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt, and how we can be good Muslims, focus on the akhlaq aspect, but never talk about what is happening today in terms of real politic. Focus
Yes.
upon the rituals, encourage people to come out to do their matam for Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, encourage people to come out and talk about what happened to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but never talk about what is going on behind the scenes. We need to have people who are more educated in going on behind the scenes and to talk about what is going on behind the scenes, so nations can come out and say to their politicians and say to their figures, what are you doing about the issues that are going on in Iraq and Pakistan? What are you doing about the fact that United Kingdom is working to gain control of Central Asian gas and oil pipelines?
Mm.
What are you doing about the fact that the populations of Afghanistan now are starving? We have starving populations in Afghanistan. All the while, the British companies have a foothold in Afghanistan and have control over the resources there. Why do we have governments in Afghanistan that likewise have expensive houses, expensive cars, and likewise have this pattern of keeping the population down so that they can keep control of a little bit of the resources in Afghanistan? This is the key issue that we need to address, and another point is that we need to empower young people. Young
Mm.
people are not given a chance on our media and at our events. We have a culture where the young people are always having to listen silently to what is going on. Young people know what's going on, being given the chance to speak. So on programs like this, we need to have young people coming forward and openly expressing the problems that they see that are going on.
That's true. So, sister, because we are heading towards like the ending, so it's just 20 minutes left. So, I would
Yeah.
like you to mention some strategies UK has used towards the economic control in the Middle East and Asia and things like that, so that we can discuss some of those points as well, which are very important. You think are these are the four most important points we need to mention, and these are the most important point we need to ponder on and think about and work on, so that our community could think about something and could like work on that as well in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as an example, Arabia, we have British and American oil companies
Mm,
working in Arabia, in the majority area of Qatif, Eastern Arabia, is where the oil is. 100 years ago, this is what I mentioned in the last program, 100
mm,
years ago, the British supported the Saud family, as we know. The Saud
mm,
family worked together with uh, Ibn Abdul Wahhab, who
mm,
was obviously promoting this Wahhabi type of Islam. So we've got the Saud family who are from Najd in Arabia. They worked together with Ibn Abdul Wahhab out of Arabia and to promote Arab identity. They were opposed to Turkish influence in Arabia, to get to kind of promote Arab identity in Arabia, and to work traditional Sunni, the four Sunni schools. They campaigned against those, and ironically, we have the Saud family promoting Wahhabi Islam, but also cooperating with the British and Americans who wanted to go into Arabia to mine the oil in Qatif and to sell the oil. So what is to, number one, raise awareness of what is going on in Eastern Arabia, and from a practical perspective, countries must develop their technology. I mean, this is this been going on for more than 100 years. That Muslim nations are surely capable of developing their own industries. If we
Hmm.
look at Iran, Iran has long developed its own industries. And
Hmm.
I saw a report just the other day that because Iran has been subject to sanctions, it
Hmm.
has relied on cooperating with Russia and China, which I would say is not ideal either.
Hmm.
It's certainly not ideal for a Muslim country to have to cooperate with countries like China and Russia, because they still have their own colonial objectives in the world today. But Iran has done a lot to develop its own technologies and industries. And so Iranians are starting to be able to buy. The West has spent a long time. So the question is, why is there this laziness going on? You know,
Hmm.
why is it that Muslim countries look at Arabia? Why was it that the Arabian monarchy, the British, was simply too lazy to develop its own oil refineries? It was
Hmm.
happy to accept a little bit of cash for a fancy lifestyle and for dominance over other Arabian tribes in exchange for handing over power to the British and the Americans. We see
Hmm.
this happening in the Gulf countries. The same mentality, which it's a mentality. Give us a little bit of cash so that we can have our fancy buildings, our fancy cars, our tigers and our leopards as pets to show off our money, you know, our gold plated Mercedes, our apartments in you know, our shopping in Harrods and our apartments in Knightsbridge. We can show off our shiny coins in exchange for you guys having control over our economies.
Hmm.
We need to wake up from this slumber and start to develop our own industries. Like I said, when
Hmm.
I look on LinkedIn, I see so-called educated Shi'i Muslims still being proud of getting a position in a British oil company.
Hmm.
We have educated Shia from doesn't matter what background, um, who have worked for decades for British and American oil companies. I would like to say, what on earth are you doing? What on
Hmm.
earth are you doing working to help the British have dominance in Muslim majorities to suck out the resources of Muslim majority countries? I would say as well to any young Pakistani Shia watching this program, if you're watching Hidayat TV, wake up from your slumber. It is not an act of achievement, a foothold in a British oil company or a British finance company. We need to think for the long term and campaign against corruption, that the
Hmm.
corruption that is being practiced by so-called Shia Muslims, the
Hmm.
bribery, the deception, the fraud that is going on. We need to bring this to that, and we need to give our youth greater evidence. This must come from the parents. The parents have to teach their children differently. Parents, teach your children. It is not an achievement to become a doctor in the British medical system, to become a banker in the British economic system, and it is not an achievement for your youth to work for an oil company. We need to step outside of this system and start to set up our own systems, and Iran has proven that it is possible to do that. That is a few tips. Another thing that we need to do for our educators, because this is not being taught in schools for our youth. Another thing, like I said elsewhere, is to teach our youth about colonial history. And inshallah, I hope we can more programs, maybe based upon this book. Like I said, I don't agree with everything that Mark Curtis has said, but we can have a series what he has brought to light here. He has talked about a partition in India and shock troops in Iran and Egypt. Shock troops. So this is a whole method of gaining control in a country. We saw this happening in Iraq, which was, there was, you know, when Iraq was invaded in 2003, their mission, their so-called mission, was called shock and awe. This is a method for stunning the population. They're so stunned by what's happened that they don't notice what is happening behind the scenes, the taking over of the resources in Iraq. We have handy weapons in Jordan and Egypt. You know how United Kingdom funneled weapons into Jordan and Egypt. Jordan itself, Jordan is a fake country that was established by United Kingdom, and in order to have a strategic place in the Middle East. The Saudi and Iranian terrorism, the so-called Afghan, the Mujahideen, which Margaret Thatcher supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, who were later funded by Bin Laden and well, Britain did all that. They even personally gave support to Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in the 80s and the 90s. These are the kinds of things we need to inform our youth, so that the youth, we can then work together with the youth, wake them up and help them to form mental independence and economic independence.
That's true.
These are a few points.
Don't you think we as a community are not working towards it in many ways? Because we do have everything. I mean, we do have Islamic centers and things like that, but we don't have kind of support system that could educate the youth in the way you are saying. Like even the parents, they are not aware, and most of our, like, if we look at the Muslim parents, for example, or the parents from you can say Pakistan, most of the time. So they are just happy for their kids to be like attaining good grades and going to the uni and this and that, and think they have achieved everything, but they are not educating themselves towards the issues you are raising. And they think if we will raise, and as you discussed in previous programs as well, like if we think about these things, or if we talk about these things, or if we discuss these things, we do have kind of threats in our minds or fear in our mind, like, oh, if we will discuss these things, we will be get killed, or we will be assassinated, or we will have this problem, and for example, even for 3 generations or 4 generations. But we do accept kind of all kind of slavery, and we do accept all kind of disrespect we face in general life in many ways. If you see, like, if there is anything happening around the globe, we just think first of all, oh my god, it's not a Muslim, it's not a Pakistani, it's not a, for example, any Muslim country, any person from any Muslim country. So we are so fearful, or some kind of with low self-esteem or something. So don't you think we first need to initiate some programs on that as well, that would enhance our self-esteem, and tell us like, being a Muslim, true Muslim or Shia Muslim, you need to have these kind of characteristics and traits that can help you work through the problems we are facing in this real world, in this time. And if I mean, we need to manage our resources, and we need to think about the resources we have, but we don't think like that. Where is that vision? Even though we do recite majalis, and every time we discuss Imam Hussein al Islam, what Imam Hussein al Islam did with his 72 friends. So we talk about this, we weep over that, we mourn over that, but we don't take stand in that way. So why don't we do that in practical form? Why we don't make plans for that matter? And why we are like so lazy in that? I mean, how would you respond that? Like, what would be the message for our community in that context? What steps we are supposed to really take at this point of time? Because we are still asleep, and even if somebody tries to wake them up, they don't get up. They just want to be sleeping all the time, and they don't want to wake up or something.
Yes, I mean, to be honest, this is what I have experienced. I mean, I have given talks in communities for 14, 15 years.
Mhm.
And the response that I've often had from people who have listened to my talks is that, they say to me, say, and that, oh, someone else will sort it out for us. Oh yeah, pull out the problem for us. We're so
Mm,
weak, we're so disempowered, we're so scared, we're so afraid. We don't want to bring stigma on ourselves by speaking out. You do it. And it's like, well, actually, one person cannot sort out everybody
mm,
else's issue.
mm,
And so there needs to be a sense of responsibility. I know that maybe this is a generational thing, that say when people came to the West, I've noticed this. There's very much this mentality, which is that keep your head down.
mm,
Keep your head down. Don't create a fuss. Tolerate
mm,
whatever you get. And, but you don't rock the boat, because you spoil your chances of whatever little gains you're making in the West.
mm. You won't get
So
jobs.
shut
Your
up
children
about the
won't get
real
jobs.
issues. Yeah, yeah. And we're going to be troublemakers, and so we will just keep quiet. And this is definitely, I would have to say, cowardice. It's
Mm,
just cowardice. And this is not helping our youth for the
mm,
future. If they
mm,
have mothers, fathers, uncle, aunts, grandparents, a whole network, a whole family that are basically just cowards, who
mm,
see their achievement as working in the British civil service, to
mm,
be Shia, writing books about the Ahlul Bayt, holding
mm,
majalis, setting up imam bargas, and
mm,
having their gatherings, but ultimately working in British organizations and for British interests,
mm,
and ultimately just being what I would call promoting this so-called social soft Shiism. That's not helping
mm.
your youth at all.
That's true.
You're not providing a service for your youth.
Mm,
A handful of people cannot sort out your issues. You cannot complain, oh, we are oppressed, and oh, everybody's against us, and oh, there's this Islamophobia, and oh, people don't like us. Oh, you sort it out. And I've had this experience many years ago where, and I bring this up often because this is a very good experience, where I would say even now 10 years ago, I had some parents coming to me complaining that their girls were being harassed at their
mm,
school, by the boys in school. oh, we don't know what to do. Oh, our girls are being harassed. What, can you do something about it? Well, I can't do something about it on my own. I said to the parents, to the principal, we collectively work together and we sign a letter and we present it to the principal and ask the principal to address the issue. What
mm,
happened when I put this to the parents? I didn't hear back. Then
mm,
after 2-3 weeks, I get a message from one of the parents saying, oh, what are you waiting for you to do something? I said, didn't I say the letter and that all the parents have to sign the letter? The parents
mm,
said, no, our daughters can sign the letter. It's like you are actually passing on responsibility for sorting out this issue to your own children. You're
mm,
not taking responsibility for your own girls being harassed by boys at school, and you're
mm,
passing on that responsibility to girls. And then eventually, the matter all disappeared. They didn't want to do anything. Later on, I spoke to one of the parents. They said, oh, the situation's getting worse. Oh, so
mm,
you are prepared for your girls to put up with being harassed by boys because you don't want to do something about somebody else to do something about it. It's this kind of example that I'm giving that, I would say, don't complain if you're not going to do something about it.
mm. That's true. We are just like fearful and cowardice because we don't want to take action. And don't you think it's the hypocrisy within our cells or within our community or within our knowledge and practices? Because in the Imam Hussein majalis we do weep a lot and mourn and everything, but practically we don't take step the way he took in all kind of oppression, in all kind of negativity, in all kind of like bad things happening around him. So that's what we are doing. Like we are just attending majalis and just fulfilling the rituals maybe, and cultural rituals or something like that, and we are not like doing practically the steps we are supposed to take. So anything you would like to ask? For just a minute is left, so I just if you want to conclude anything in a minute, so then we have to end up.
Yeah. Well, I hear from quite a lot of parents that young people are not attending majalis as they get into their 20s. They stop attending majalis. They citing Noha, and the youth come to the conclusion that our questions are not being answered. Our issues are not being addressed.
Hmm.
We want to know, want to gain knowledge, we want to be empowered, and we're not being helped.
Hmm.
And so, again, I would say to the parents, don't blame the youth, don't blame the government, don't blame everything else. Look to yourself, that
Hmm.
it is not sufficient just for your daughters and sons to recite Noha. This is
Hmm.
not going to help resolve very pressing practical issues. We
Hmm.
have to encourage our youth to be brave, to have courage, to be independent. They want to be mentally, psychologically independent. They want to be proud followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and they need the guidance on how to do that. And that youth want to have the courage to, to
Hmm.
tackle. And so the parents need to follow the requests of their youth and start to have courage. Otherwise, they're only going to help with the destruction of their own communities.
That's true. Thank you so much, Dr. Rebecca. I'm really grateful, and it was honor to have you on the show. I'm really grateful for your presence and participation. Thank you so much. And to the viewers, I would just say the way Sister Rebecca said, like we need to educate our youth and ourselves first, and we have to come out of this cowardice and hypocrisy, and we have to take practical actions towards our future, and we have to make those think tanks, and we have to remind ourselves that we are followers of Ahlul Bayt in practical sense. Only then we can survive in future. I will see you hopefully next week. And now I take a leave and pray that you all be doing well in the future. Thank you so much. Fi Aman Allah.